This week I want to introduce you to lights in 3D and material options, and then also start to show you an example or prepare you for Project 3. So Project 3 is a 3D environment, and we can use After Effects 3D and Cinema 4D Light. You can use a combination or one or the other to design and animate a unique 3D environment. Okay, it doesn't have to, but it could be a continuation of the narrative development from Project 2. Again, in the hopes that we're working towards a longer narrative project for your final, but you also don't have to. You can kind of refresh and start something new for each project if you'd like. But we are creating a 3D and animating our way through a 3D environment for this next project, which is due April 11th. So here in After Effects, I have a very basic scene I've created. None of these layers yet are 3D layers. So what I'm going to do is turn them all on to be 3D layers. And this means that now I can activate their Z values in their position, and they're no longer just kind of flat in the Y and the X. I'm going to change this view to 2 views. So I have my active camera view. Maybe I'll make this left one my active camera. And again, remember, After Effects will add a default camera. The minute you add a camera to the scene, or more than one camera, the one that's on the top will be the active camera in your layer list. So I have these little blue triangles in the corner. That tells me that I can, that this view is activated. Now this view, I can change I can change which camera I'm looking at. There are these custom views here, which I think are useful when working in 3D. And it just gives you a kind of side view of the whole scene, and it allows you to kind of visualize the Z-axis a little bit better. So I'm going to use this custom view 3 here. I'm going to zoom out. And then in each shape layer, I'm going to shift select all my shape layers. I'm going to hit P so I can work with their position. And then I'm going to just start to add some, for each layer. I want to have them all selected. I'm just going to start to add some depth into, and I'm just doing this with scrubbing. I think what I'll do is this layer I'll keep that at 0. I might even want to just say work incrementally here. Maybe I want this at -50. This one at -250. This one at 0, and then this layer here. Let's open up the position information for my solid as well. We'll put this at 100, and then the solid as well. We'll bring that back to, let's say, 300. And I also, what you'll see is that in moving these, the scale of each hasn't been maintained in relationship to the camera. So as they go back in space, they appear smaller. So what I might want to do as well is go into their scale by hitting the S key and then just scaling up some of the layers that I need to fill the whole screen. So it doesn't look like a tremendous amount has happened here in my active camera. It still looks very two-dimensional. But here you can see in my custom view, and maybe we can look at different custom views and see, just to get a sense of that kind of depth that we've created just by moving each of those shape layers in the position Z. So let's start to create some depth here. And I can do that by using lights. So I'm going to go to the top, I'm going to twirl all these back. And I'm going to go to Layer, New, Light. And there's a couple different lights we can add. We can use, you can see what the light type is here. We have ambient, which will just flood the entire area with a kind of even lighting. We have a point light, which acts like a bare light bulb in the room, which will have some drop off over a distance from the center of that light. We have a spotlight that does that, but it is also directional, so it will point in one direction. Then we have parallel, which I believe is like a directional light. I'm going to start with the spotlight here. We also have this, we can turn on or off the cast shadows and then some of the shadow settings that we see. I'm just going to go ahead and say okay. And here you can see it's adopted some of the parameters that I've already added to that I was playing around with the lights. But let me go now to my light settings just to show you what some of those are. So I have this, you can see I have this fall off here. Let me reduce the cone angle. So when you first create a spotlight, it might look something like this. And then we have the cone feather, which means how much around the edge is this feathered, the angle, the intensity. We can bump down or bump up the intensity. We can also add a color to the light and give it a little bit of a yellow tint. And I might increase the cone angle so that it's flooding the entire scene. But you can see that over distance, it starts to fall off. And if I go to my rotation here for my light, I'm gonna go ahead and say, okay. If I go to my rotation, I hit R, and I start to rotate this, let's say in the Y axis, you can see that this light will only illuminate in the direction which it's pointing. Okay. So that's one type of light. Let's turn this off. I'm turning off the visibility of this spotlight to show you a different kind of light. Let's go layer, new light, and this one we'll choose a point light. Let's change the color here, make it a cooler value, and say okay. And now you'll see that with the point light, what some of its settings are. We don't have the cone angle or cone feather, and I can't affect the fall off here. I can turn this on, and now I can change the radius and the fall off distance. So without this turned on, if it has no fall off, let's see if anywhere it is in space. Go ahead and move it here. Say okay. Let's move this light. So we do still have, you can see that the farther away it is, it's as bright as it's going to be. But as it gets closer or passes some of these first, it's starting to get closer and passing some of these layers. So it's a little bit farther in on the Z-axis, so then it's starting to make those layers darker. But without that fall off, let's go back to our light settings, and we go to layer, light settings here. If we put the fall off to smooth, now you can see, and we can change the radius of it. This is showing you that it's kind of like a bare light bulb in the room, and there's a fall off, meaning that the light intensity gets less and less as it farther distance, a kind of spherical distance away from the center of the light. So we have these two lights in our scene now. I can actually turn them both on if I want. Let's see the visibility for both of these. And we can see them kind of interacting. I might want to just, again, maybe with both of these lights on, I might want to fix their intensity so that it's not too bright. Turn down the intensity here of my spotlight. And I'm also going to move the spotlight. Since I have my point light here on the right of my scene, I'll move my spotlight here on the left. And now maybe I'll actually increase that intensity a bit. Okay, and I can also access these lighting, the lighting options here. If I twirl down in my light itself, in my layer list, here's a lot of those options. I have my intensity, the color, the cone angle, the fall off, radius, and all of that, and cast shadows, yes or no. So the same light settings I can manipulate here under layer light settings. I can also just twirl down in the layer list and make those adjustments here. So how do I get some shadows cast? Well, I can do that by selecting my individual layers here, twirling them open, and then under material options. And the first material option you'll see here is cast shadows. I'm actually going to work with, I can do this with, sure, I'll just do it with all of them. Here I'll just say cast shadows and turn that on. And I'm going to do that for all of my shape layers. Okay, and now we can see that we have some shadows in our scene that are being cast from these lights. If we move the lights, let's move these lights. Let's move the spotlight a little bit. I'm going to go to the position and let's move the spotlight. And now you can see that the shadow in the active camera starts to change its location in the scene. And I'm going to move it again. And it's really the position of the light that's going to determine where those shadows are placed. So if I go to my light settings, I'm also able to adjust how dark the shadows are. Okay, so I might want it to be a little bit lighter, and then how diffuse those shadows are. Meaning, you know, how much softness do we have around the edges of those shadows. And I'm going to do the same now for my point light. I'm going to go to my light settings and turn down the shadow darkness. So you see that these objects are affected here on the left by this spotlight, and here on the right by this point light. So I just knocked down the intensity of those two shadows. Let me move this point light in space just so we can see the shadows move. And this is something that you can adjust and play with. Here we go. In order to get the desired effect. So now we have a really nice kind of dynamic 3D scene. And I want to show you now some other options here for our material options. I'm going to start with this shape layer here. Twirl down its attributes and go to material options. Material options basically allow you to manipulate the way that light interacts or bounces off of your object. So here I can manipulate diffuse, and what this will do is this will kind of increase or decrease the intensity of that light on this object. And then I also have here specular intensity. And if I increase this, it shows me how much of the highlight from this light will be affecting my object, how shiny it is, how kind of acute or what the angle is of that specular. So you can see here that there's a little bit of a lightness. So by working with these two together, I can kind of give a highlight right to the top of this, the edge of this object. I'm going to go to my one view here so we can really see this. Active camera. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, right? So we can kind of see that there's this shininess here. And then metal basically makes the, if I put metal down to 0%, you can see that this really has a real brightness, and I can turn it up. And now it's more reflective, and so it's less bright. Okay, so those are some of the material options. Let's go ahead and manipulate them here for the shape layer 1. Do the same thing and just kind of play with them. Increase the diffuse, and you can see how the light diffuses over the shape. Turn up the specular intensity and its shininess, meaning that you can see that value, now I have two specular highlights on this shape because I have my point light here and my spotlight here. And you can even see how this is a cooler specular highlight and this is a warmer one because this spotlight is yellow tinted and this point light is blue tinted. Okay, and wherever those highlights will change depending on where the lights are positioned. Okay, so let's go back and turn on the metal, turn down the metal here so we have it looking really reflective and shiny. And I'm going to do the same here now for my little circles. Let's open up the material options here. I want to turn up the metalness, but let's see if I can really get a nice highlight on the bottom corner. And I'll do the same here with the shape layer 3. Increase the specular intensity and its shininess. Okay, and that's how you can work with some of the materials to so that they're not just kind of flat one color. You can add some dimensionality as in the way that these specular highlights interact with the object based on where the light's positions are and the different values that are associated with those lights in your scene. The last thing I want to show you regarding lights is that how do you get lights to just affect certain layers and not others? You would do this by using the adjustment layer switch here, and also by repositioning those lights in in the layer list. So if I move this point light, let's say I don't want the point light to be affecting this front of this object here. I might reposition this object in the layer list to be in the front, and then I'm going to take my point light and I'm going to drop it underneath layer 2. Now nothing's happened here because it's not an adjustment layer yet. Once it's an adjustment layer, then that light is no longer affecting this front shape. But because the front shape is still a 3D layer, there's no light in the scene besides the spotlight, so it's getting a little bit of light from this spotlight on the corner, but the rest of it's black because there's no light. So that's how you can, so like let's just bring this one back down and say I don't want this layer to be affected by that point light, so I will bring this to the top and then move that point light down and make this point light an adjustment layer, and now it's no longer affecting this shape in the top corner. Okay, so that's how you can get lights to only interact with certain layers by making them adjustment layers and by reordering the layer list. And remember, it doesn't necessarily, you know, wherever these objects are positioned in the 3D space dimensionally is how those lights and the shadows are going to play off of each other. And then you can reorder the layer list so that you can adjust where your lights are and how they're affecting the overall scene. So again, we have this custom view 3 and we can see from the side how this looks